The courtroom was packed tight, hot, humid, full of nerves and neckties. It smelled like old wood, paper, and anxiety. Every bench creaked under the weight of anticipation. People were there for a murder case, big headlines. But that ain't what they remembered when they left. Nope. What stuck was something smaller, quieter. The moment everything started to break wasn't loud. No fireworks, no shouting. Just a thud. A thud of a mop bucket tipping over as a small, elderly woman with stooped shoulders and a faded maintenance badge bumped against the prosecutor's table. Her gloves were still on, her hair tucked into a net, and her eyes. God, her eyes looked ancient. Judge Harlan didn't even pause the hearing. He just turned, tight-lipped, jaw clenched, and said, "You are a distraction. Remove her." Just like that, a bailiff moved in fast, heavy boots across the floor, grabbing her by the elbow like she was some kind of pest. You could feel the shift in the air. Like even the walls were thinking, "Yo, wait, what the hell?" She didn't resist, didn't beg. Just stood there, looking straight at the judge like she was trying to read something written on his forehead. Something old, something ugly. And then, boom, everything changed. Because this woman, this distraction, wasn't just a janitor, not really. Her name was Mrs. Naomi Hill, 69 years old, retired legal clerk, widow of a respected civil rights attorney, a woman who once filed a landmark amicus brief in a housing discrimination case. And more importantly, the grandmother of the defendant standing on trial that very day. What nobody knew, not the press, not the prosecutors, not even the public defender, was that Mrs. Hill had been sitting in on this trial since day one, quietly, always cleaning around the edges, watching, listening. Because Naomi wasn't just cleaning floors, she was gathering dirt. And that bump, that so-called accident, it was timed to the minute. Right after the judge had allowed a suspicious piece of evidence to be submitted. Right after the DA got a mysterious, last-minute witness added to the list. That thud wasn't clumsiness, that was a signal. Security tried to pull her out, but before they could cross the threshold, Naomi said loud enough for the entire room to hear, "You ever wonder how many convictions this courtroom's buried under lies?" Silence. The prosecutor froze. The defendant, a lanky 20-year-old black kid named Marcus, just stared, mouth slightly open. The judge turned beet red. Naomi reached into her cart, slowly, purposefully, and pulled out a faded manila folder. Thick, stuffed, labeled in handwritten ink, Judge Harlan, case 71614B. Evidence never entered. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. The folder hit the ground. Pages spilled everywhere. Handwritten notes, redacted court transcripts, copies of emails between the DA and the judge's office. Judge Harlan jumped to his feet. "Remove her now!" he shouted. But it was already too late. Half the courtroom had their phones out. One reporter in the back had gone Facebook Live before the bailiff even touched Naomi's arm again. She turned to the crowd, voice trembling but fierce. "They railroaded my grandson, same as they did his father. And I kept quiet too damn long, but not today. Today, y'all gone see what justice really looks like." And just like that, the trial of Marcus Hill shifted into something much bigger. The real trial had begun, not of Marcus, but of a system that mistook silence for consent. That thought old black women pushing mop carts wouldn't push back. But this one? Naomi Hill had been planning her opening blow for years. The courthouse ain't just old, it's ancient. The kind of place where history clings to the walls like dust. No one dares to wipe off. Marble floors, columns like Roman temples, stained glass windows with justice scales that never quite balanced. If you listen close enough, you don't just hear footsteps. You hear ghosts. Decisions whispered behind chambers. Deals struck under breath. Whole lives redirected with a flick of a gavel. And on this morning, the whispers started early. Judge Ronald Harlan's first official day on the bench. His entrance, cinematic. Black car pulls up, door swings open, and out steps a man who looked like he was carved out of mahogany and ego. Tailored charcoal suit, silver tie pin, and a Rolex so polished you could see your sins in it. His handshake? Calculated. His smile? Thin. And that posture? man stood like he was measuring the building to make sure it was worthy of him. Folks called him the Fix. A judge who didn't ask which way the wind was blowing. He told it where to go. He was appointed after Judge Levitt, the quiet but respected black jurist who left without a word. No party, no goodbyes. Just gone. Some said it was health. Others whispered about pressure. One janitor swore they heard shouting behind closed doors the week before Levitt stepped down. But in this place, whispers were safer than questions. So now it was Harlan's house, and trust, he made sure everyone felt it. "Order!" he barked that morning, like he was speaking to dogs instead of attorneys. The courtroom, already uneasy, snapped still. "Today," he said, "we begin restoring order and integrity to this bench." He didn't say it outright, but everyone heard what he meant. Levitt didn't have what it took. We're taking the bench back. The old way is the right way. The lawyers, the bailiffs. Even the clerks felt it, the energy shift. Some nodded along, relieved to have someone who meant business. Others stayed quiet, brows furrowed, their guts twisting with unease. Judge Harlan had cut his teeth in politics before the law. City council, DA's office, even did a stint as a campaign advisor for a state senator with questionable policies and even more questionable company. He was connected, respected, and unbothered by what anyone thought of him. You could see it in the way he looked at people, not at them, through them, as if he already knew your whole story and didn't like the ending. His chambers were remodeled before he even sat the first case. The old portraits of previous judges were moved, replaced with minimalist art and books that nobody believed he'd read. Staff was reassigned, schedules were redrawn, and rules changed overnight. The old hierarchy, the one Judge Levitt quietly tried to untangle, came back swinging, with a new name at the top. And Harlan made it clear. There was no room for softness, no room for sympathy, especially not for kids like Marcus Hill. "Graffiti today, gangbanging tomorrow," Harlan had muttered in pretrial discussion. Loud enough for the clerk to hear, quiet enough to deny. The prejudice wasn't loud, it was professional, dressed in citations and legalese. And the marble halls, they didn't argue, they just echoed it back. But what Harlan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that while he was busy making his grand entrance, something had already slipped into the cracks. Something old, something sharp, something with patience and pain woven into its bones. Naomi Hill had been sweeping those marble halls since Harlan was playing intern on Capitol Hill. She knew every creak in the floor, every vent where voices leaked through, every man who thought his name could shield him from truth. And now, with the system trying to reset itself under a new face with the same rot, she was done whispering. Because when the halls speak lies, someone has to shout the truth. And Naomi? She was just getting warmed up. Her name is Estela Ramirez, but inside the courthouse walls, nobody says it. Not the clerks, not the lawyers, not even the other janitors. To them, she's just her, or the mop lady. A shadow in a teal uniform, always sliding through the side doors with a bucket that squeaks, and a silence that stretches too long. But make no mistake, Estela's silence wasn't emptiness, it was strategy. She had been working that courthouse for 16 years. Same hallway, same route, same dead-eyed routine. Morning floors, midday trash, evening toilets. She timed her breaks by the judge's tempers and the lawyer's coffee orders. She learned the rhythm of the place like a song only she knew how to hum. Nobody looked twice. That's what made it perfect. Estela's story didn't start in that courthouse. It started in another one. Different city, different state, where her brother, Diego, stood trial for a crime he didn't commit. He was 17, brown, broke, wrong neighborhood, wrong cop, wrong day. The judge called him a lost cause, and the system swallowed him whole. He lasted 8 months inside before the guards found him, slumped in a cell. Suicide, they said. But Estela saw the bruises, the teeth knocked out, the blood that never made it into the coroner's notes. After that, Estela stopped screaming. Screaming never got her anywhere. She picked up a mop, and she started watching. The Charleston courthouse became her second home. She transferred down when her mother got sick, and she never left. 16 years later, no one knew her story, but Estella knew everyone else's. She knew Judge Harlan long before he took the bench, knew his ties to the DA, to shady developers downtown, knew how he'd fast-tracked his appointment through a favor ode and a bottle of scotch delivered to the right fundraiser. She knew Ada Brewster was sleeping with a married councilwoman and using city funds to fly out for legal symposiums in Vegas. She knew which bailiff was stealing confiscated weed from evidence and selling it out of his cousin's vape shop on Rivers Avenue. She knew things, and she kept knowing more. Every paper left on a desk, every whisper from an open chamber door, every corrupted fingerprint on a crooked file. Estella collected them all like a crow with shiny things. She didn't want revenge. She wanted proof. Not to burn the place down with a headline, but to make them say it. In public, under oath, with the weight of law wrapped around their lies like chains. And when Marcus Hill's case hit the docket, her cue was clear. She knew Marcus. Knew his grandma Naomi from way back. From church potlucks and neighborhood meetings that ended with more questions than answers. She remembered when Naomi's husband tried to fight zoning laws that kept black families boxed into dying neighborhoods. Remembered the funeral. Remembered the sound Naomi made when the coffin closed. Estella had waited long enough. The morning of the trial, she packed the manila folder into her cart like it was just more trash. Printed court transcripts, audio clips burned to a disc, handwritten notes connecting names, dates, deals. She didn't trust computers, didn't trust cloud storage, just hard paper and her own damn eyes. That bump against the prosecutor's table? It wasn't an accident. It was a shot fired in a war they didn't know had started. And when Judge Harlan called her a distraction, Estella didn't flinch. She knew better. She knew exactly what she was. Not a cleaner, not a ghost. She was the spark. The woman with the mop had just flipped the switch. And the lights in the courthouse? They were about to get real bright. If the courtroom is where justice pretends to happen, the lunchroom is where truth gets spilled, with extra salt and zero filters. At exactly 12:17 p.m., the break room on the second floor of the Charleston courthouse buzzed like a wasp's nest poked one too many times. Microwaves hummed. Tupperware lids popped. But all anyone could talk about was her. Not Judge Harlan, not Marcus Hill, not even the protest forming outside. Nope, just one name slipping between whispers like smoke: Estella. She slapped the system right in the mouth with a manila folder, muttered a paralegal, as she stirred her instant ramen. Not slapped, corrected another. She detonated. 3 clerks sat huddled around a too-small table, eyes darting like they were passing national security secrets instead of warmed-up gossip. That's when Marla, a curly-haired court clerk who'd worked there 6 years too long, leaned in and said, "I've seen her." Everyone froze. "Seen who?" one asked, pretending not to know. "Estella. I've seen her walk through the East Corridor. You know, the one near the Judicial Library, the one with the coded keycard lock." Another voice jumped in. "Wait, the one with the portraits? The you don't go there unless you have a badge hallway?" "Exactly." Forks hovered midair. Marla continued, voice lower. "Last year, late afternoon. She was pushing her cart, didn't even look surprised I saw her. Just gave me this weird nod like, don't ask. Then turned down the corridor like she had every right." A younger intern chimed in, wide-eyed, "You sure it was her? Unless there's another 5'2" Latina woman in that crusty green uniform pushing a mop cart with one busted wheel. Yeah, I'm sure." Someone else, a temp from records, leaned in like she'd been waiting for her moment. "I saw something too. A while ago, a letter in her cart, tucked under a clipboard. Real casual. But I saw the seal." "What seal?" She whispered it like saying it out loud would summon the feds. "Supreme Court." No one breathed. "You're lying." "Swear on my cat." "Girl, you don't even like your cat." "That's not the point." Marla squinted. "Okay, but why would she have a Supreme Court letter?" The temp shrugged. "Hell if I know. Maybe she's like deep cover, CIA, Supreme Janitor of Secrets." They all laughed. But it was nervous laughter. That uncomfortable kind that creeps in when the truth might actually be crazier than the jokes. Because now everything felt different. Estella wasn't just the woman with the mop. She wasn't background noise anymore. She was a mystery, one with a silent step and a memory like a steel trap. A bailiff stepped into the room to refill his coffee. Caught the vibe instantly. "You're talking about the cleaning lady, right?" Everyone went quiet. He smirked. Y'all don't know a damn thing about her, but you're not wrong to be scared. And with that, he walked out, leaving a room full of half-eaten lunches and fully shattered nerves. Estella had always been invisible. Now, she was unforgettable. Judge Harlan stormed back into the courthouse, like he expected the marble to bow beneath his wingtips. Fresh off a lunch he barely touched. Some overpriced steak that tasted like regret. He was already chewing on his favorite post-meal snack. Irritation. Because when he got it back to his spot, his reserved parking spot, the one with the sign that read Judge R. Harlan in bold block letters, it was gone. Just gone. Replaced by a generic, reserved for building maintenance plaque. And in its place, a dusty gray pickup truck with a ladder strapped to the top, and a bucket of bleach sitting in the bed like it paid rent. "Excuse me," he barked at the first person who passed by. Some intern with a tie too tight and anxiety in his sneakers. The kid just shrugged and practically sprinted inside. By the time Harlan reached the clerk's desk in the east lobby, his cheeks were red, and not from the Charleston sun. He slammed his palm down. "Why is my parking space gone?" The clerk, an unbothered woman named Jenna, who'd survived 3 judicial administrations, didn't even blink. "New directive from the building owner, Your Honor, effective today." "Effective? What?" Harlan scoffed. "No one notified me. That's my space. My name was on the damn post." Jenna tapped her keyboard once, twice. "Says here, the order came in early this morning. Authorized at the building management level, signed off by head of operations."
Head of who the hell is that?
She shrugged. "Same guy that's been here for a decade. Real quiet. Works nights. Usually doesn't get involved unless it's structural." Harlan's nostrils flared. "It's a clerical error. Just fix it." But Jenna didn't move. Just stared back with the calmness of someone who'd seen louder men get quieter in cuffs. "I'll submit a request to reverse it," she said. "But until it's approved, that space is reserved for maintenance." Harlan didn't say thank you. He turned on his heel, coat flaring like a villain in a courtroom drama, and stalked off down the corridor. But as he walked, something crawled up the back of his neck like a cold hand. The marble under his shoes didn't feel as solid anymore. The sunlight through the courthouse windows suddenly felt a little too warm. Every shadow seemed to watch him. Because this wasn't just a parking mix-up. This was a move, a message, and not a loud one either. Not some scandalous headline or courtroom outburst. This was quiet power. The kind that changed names on doors, edited access lists, and reprogrammed security codes before you even noticed. The kind of power he didn't control. Harlan tried to shake it off, probably just a mistake. But something in his gut gnawed back. He knew the game, had played it for years. This wasn't a clerical error. It was chess, and someone had just made the first move. Courtroom 2B was packed again, tension hanging in the air like cheap cologne. Judge Harlan was halfway through a bail hearing for a petty theft case when the door at the rear creaked open, a rare breach of his courtroom mid-proceeding. Heads turned. Phones twitched in pockets. It was Laverne Hunt, senior court administrator, a woman who walked like her clipboard could break necks. She didn't apologize, didn't hesitate. She marched straight to the bench, heels echoing off the marble like punctuation. Harlan didn't even try to hide his irritation. "Ms. Hunt," he said, words clipped, "you're interrupting a live docket." She didn't blink, just extended a hand with a plain, sealed envelope. "I've been instructed to suspend your docket for the rest of the day." Silence. Harlan froze for a fraction too long, then laughed, dry, arrogant, the kind of laugh that smells like power. "By whose authority?" he snapped. Laverne didn't speak, just nodded toward the envelope like it was already louder than she ever needed to be. Harlan snatched it with a huff, broke the seal, and pulled out a single sheet of heavy stationery. Gold crest at the top, hand-signed at the bottom. As his eyes scanned the lines, the color began to drain from his face, like a sink leak slow dripping his confidence. He read it again, and again. His fingers clutched the page tighter with each pass, creasing the paper like it had personally betrayed him. The room was dead still, not even a cough. The kind of silence that tastes like thunder about to roll. From the gallery, someone whispered, "What's going on?" Another voice. Did he just flinch? And yeah, he did. For the first time since stepping on the bench, Judge Ronald Harlan looked shook. Not just annoyed or angry, spooked. He looked up, eyes sweeping the room like maybe someone was filming this. Spoiler, they were. His mouth twitched, then he stood. "This court is in recess until further notice," he said, voice suddenly sandpaper dry. No gavel bang, no explanation. He turned, clutching the envelope like it was radioactive, and disappeared through the side door to his chambers. And just like that, the session imploded. Whispers turned to buzz. Bailiffs shuffled uneasily. Lawyers leaned into each other like co-conspirators. One intern texted so fast their thumbs blurred. Laverne Hunt just turned and walked out the same way she came. Straight-backed, eyes forward, not one damn word offered. Back inside his chambers, Harlan slammed the door and dropped into his leather chair like gravity had just tripled. He opened the envelope again and reread the signature at the bottom. Deputy Chief Justice Anna C. Moreau, Office of State Judicial Oversight. Below it, effective immediately. All presiding authority of Judge Ronald Harlan shall be reviewed under emergency procedural audit pending internal investigation. Until further notice, all court activity is suspended. Do not disclose the nature of this notice. He hadn't seen that name in years. Didn't even know she still worked in state. But she'd always had a sharp memory, and a sharper grudge. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, heart jackhammering under his ribs. Estela Ramirez, that goddamn cleaning lady, that folder. Something had shifted. And it wasn't just the docket. It was the entire balance of the building. He'd felt untouchable for too long. But now the machine was turning without him. They heard her before they saw her. No squeaky wheels, no sloshing mop bucket, no faint scent of bleach trailing behind. Just footsteps. 3 sets, measured, sharp, intentional. The double doors at the back of courtroom 2B opened slowly. No burst, no drama. Just enough for light to pour in and for every head in the room to turn like magnets. Estela Ramirez stepped through. No janitor uniform, no gloves, no cleaning card. She wore a slate gray blazer with silver buttons and creases so sharp they could slice egos. Her hair was tied back, tight and deliberate. A black leather folio was tucked under her arm, not too flashy, just official enough to whisper, "I know things you don't." Flanking her were 2 suits, not rent-a-cops, not courthouse security. These were high-level federal quiet types. One had an earpiece. The other scanned the room with eyes like heat sensors. And Estela? Estela didn't even look around. She walked straight down the center aisle. Not toward the benches, not toward the witness box, but toward the private judge's entrance. The one only judges, clerks, and very important people were allowed to use. The room fell completely silent. Clerks froze mid-note. A defense attorney straight up forgot their own argument. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered like she'd glitched. Because this woman, the same woman who mopped around their feet like a ghost for years, was now walking like she owned the damn building. No badge, no robe, just that look, calm, focused, and absolutely unfuckwithable. The moment she reached the private door, the federal escort on her right nodded to a court officer. The door, usually locked with a biometric scanner and reinforced bolts, clicked open with zero resistance. She disappeared inside. 1 second, 2. The door closed behind her with a gentle thunk. No words, no announcement, just impact, like thunder without sound. Whispers exploded as soon as the latch caught. "Wait, what? Was that her?" "That's the cleaning lady." "Nah, what is happening right now?" "Did you see those suits?" "She's walking like she's in charge." From the clerk's bench, Marla just sat there, wide-eyed, muttering to no one in particular. She's not a janitor. Not anymore. Meanwhile, behind the closed door, Estela handed off her folio to a federal agent. Inside it, unredacted transcripts, sealed case notes, names crossed out in red ink. A list Judge Harlan never wanted to see again. And at the top, a single handwritten title, Integrity Compromised. Outside, the courtroom buzzed with confusion. Inside, Estela sat across from 3 federal auditors and 1 very pale representative from the Office of Judicial Oversight. No mop, no mask, just a woman finally using the power she'd spent a lifetime collecting. 1 footstep at a time. It started with a throat clear. Nothing flashy, no music. No bailiff shout, just a cough, low, deliberate, the kind that grabs attention without asking for it. Bailiff Carter stood up straight, chest puffed slightly, eyes sweeping across the packed courtroom. He didn't speak immediately, letting the silence wrap around the room like a held breath. Then, "Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice echoing like gospel through the oak-paneled walls. "Please rise, for the owner of this courthouse, Ms. Estela Ramirez." It was like the air got punched. A beat, two, then chaos. Silent chaos. Not a sound, but mouths opened, eyes bulged. One attorney dropped their pen and it clattered to the floor like a starting gun. Nobody moved. Not right away. It was too surreal. A glitch in the matrix. The woman who had wiped the baseboards, who they'd handed trash to without eye contact, was now the owner. Judge Harlan, seated and still pale from the sealed envelope ambush earlier, looked like someone had rebooted his soul mid-thought. His lips parted, then closed, then opened again like he was catching flies instead of forming sentences. Estela walked through the private judge's entrance again. Only this time, she wasn't flanked. No suits, no shadows. Just her. But not the mop and bucket version. She wore midnight blue. No flashy jewelry, no gimmicks. Just tailored strength and lived-in confidence. Her heels tapped like punctuation on the marble floor, echoing louder than any gavel she'd ever cleaned under. And when she reached the front of the bench, she didn't sit. She turned, faced them all, back straight, hands at her sides, a queen without the crown because she didn't need it. "I know," she said, voice calm. "This may come as a surprise." Understatement of the year. "But what's more surprising," she continued, eyes locking with Harlan's, "is how many people can spend years in a building and never really look at the people who keep it standing." She didn't need to raise her voice. She was the only sound that mattered. "I bought this building 9 years ago," she said plainly, "under a shell corporation created after my late husband passed. I didn't tell anyone, not out of shame, but because I was waiting." Now the whisper started. Too quiet to make out fully, but there, scurrying, uncertain. The weight of an exposed truth no one was ready for. "I waited because this courthouse had roots that ran deep into corruption. And some of those roots," she said, her gaze falling heavy on Harlan again, "sat behind that very bench." Harlan opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His body had caught up to the fear his mind was still trying to outpace. Estela's eyes didn't leave his. "I've seen it all. The intimidation, the backroom deals, the kids thrown away for profit, and the good people pushed out just for asking too many questions." She turned slightly, addressing the gallery now. "This place was built to hold the law, but it became a vault for secrets. So I started collecting them." She lifted one hand and nodded to Carter, who handed her a thick folder. She placed it gently on the defense table. "In here are 57 sealed documents, 10 whistleblower affidavits, and 4 signed statements from current court officials, each one confirming that systemic bias has shaped the docket for over a decade." Gasps now. Audible. Someone said "holy shit" under their breath and didn't even bother to apologize. Estela paused, let the moment sink in, then spoke again, softer, deadlier. "This building belongs to the people, and it's time it started acting like it." The room rose to their feet like they forgot they had bones. Not because they were told to, but because something, some instinct, told them they were watching a moment that would be printed in history books and whispered in future hallways. Judge Harlan stood too, but it wasn't out of respect. It was survival instinct. Because suddenly, he wasn't the most powerful person in the room anymore. And Estela Ramirez, she wasn't the woman with the mop. She was the woman with the keys. Flashback, 12 years ago. Estela Ramirez was not wearing a mop uniform. She wasn't pushing a bucket or ducking into service stairwells. No. She was gliding across the 32nd floor of Holloway, Mercer and Dean, one of the most viciously respected corporate law firms in the country. The kind of place where glass walls hid closed-door secrets and associates bled billable hours for lunch money. And Estela, she was a killer in heels, youngest senior partner in the firm's history. Harvard Law, double bar certified, fluent in 3 languages and 5 types of corporate litigation. Her name was printed on deals that moved millions before breakfast. She made boardrooms go silent just by walking in, and when she spoke, people shut up and signed checks. But even in a tower full of sharks, Estela knew how to smell blood. It started with a routine discovery review. One of those 100-page dumps from a case involving public infrastructure bonds. A line item caught her eye. Something about private donations tied to judicial transition initiatives. That sounded off, so she followed it. And the deeper she dug, the uglier it got. Turns out the firm wasn't just representing major developers. They were owning the pipeline of judges that greenlit their projects. Secret contributions, scholarship funds for judicial families, and worse, whispers of blackmail files, held in case a robe got too righteous. One name popped up again and again: Harlan. Not yet a judge, but already greased for the seat. Donations from ghost packs, recommendation letters from men who didn't even know his middle name. It was all lined up. Estella brought it to her managing partner. Not to snitch, just to ask. "What is this?" she said, folder in hand. He smiled. That kind of smile. "You've got a brilliant mind," he told her, "but you still don't understand how the world works." That night, she packed up her desk, walked away. No tantrum, no goodbye party. Just took her diplomas off the wall and left the glass tower to choke on its own secrets. They thought she'd go start her own firm. Thought she'd write a tell-all. Maybe hop on TV. She did none of that. Instead, she disappeared. She kept her bar license. Worked part-time contracts under aliases. Used quiet fees to start a private trust. Grand Lumber Holdings. No flashy HQ, just a P.O. box and a network of shell companies. Over the next 10 years, she began buying property. Not condos, not stocks, institutions, old libraries, public meeting halls, court buildings left to rot by the state budget slashes. All legally, all quietly, all under her name. She didn't need recognition. She needed leverage. And 6 months ago, buried under an avalanche of bureaucracy and a state-led courthouse privatization plan, Estella Ramirez signed the papers that made her the legal owner of the Charleston County Courthouse. Not a rumor, not a stunt, a fact. Recorded, filed, signed in ink. She didn't announce it. She didn't change anything yet. She just waited until the wrong judge hit the wrong kid's name on a docket, and a system too comfortable in its own shadow finally pushed too far. And now they all knew who Estella Ramirez really was. Not a janitor, not a woman cleaning up after messes she didn't make. She was a lawyer turned silent architect of justice, and she was done sweeping. The courtroom was standing room only. Reporters packed shoulder to shoulder. Lawyers clutched briefcases like life vests. Even courthouse staff, usually jaded, caffeine-fueled zombies, hovered near the door, trying to look like they weren't watching but absolutely were. At the front of the room, Judge Harlan sat on the bench like he was clinging to a throne made of wet sand. Paler than usual, jaw tight. Right leg bouncing in that subtle, "I'm not nervous, you're nervous" way. Then the doors opened, and everything else stopped. Estella Ramirez entered alone. No entourage, no security detail. Just her, calm as a full moon, walking down the center aisle with a slim black folder in hand and judgment in her posture. She didn't ask for silence. She brought it with her. Stopping at the center podium, she turned toward the bench and spoke, clear and controlled. "Judge Harlan," she said, "not Your Honor, not Sir, just Harlan. Your conduct today was not just disrespectful. It was disqualifying." A beat, no one breathed. "You've violated not only the spirit of this court, but the integrity of the position you swore to uphold. The law, as you so often remind us, is not above people, but you've acted as if you are above both." He tried to interject, started with, "Ms. Ramirez, you're out of..." She held up a single finger, and the room froze. "I'm not finished," she said. Then, without raising her voice, she placed the folder on the clerk's table and opened it with the same precision you'd use to detonate a bomb. Inside, documentation, thick, tabbed, categorized like a scalpel collection. "Let the record reflect," Estella continued, "that the following materials have been submitted to the State Judicial Review Board." She held up a flash drive first. "This contains courtroom surveillance footage from 4 separate incidents, all involving you, Judge Harlan. In one, you deny counsel to a public defender without cause. In another, you make racially charged remarks off mic. Except the mic wasn't off. We have the audio." Then she held up a paper packet. "These are 10 signed affidavits from clerks, bailiffs, and attorneys, each detailing threats, intimidation, and clear ethical violations committed from the bench." Gasps rippled, audible now. Harlan looked like he wanted to disappear into the upholstery. And then came the letter. Heavy envelope, official seal. Estella didn't read it. She simply passed it to Bailiff Carter, who unfolded it and read aloud. To Judge Ronald Harlan, based on the materials submitted and preliminary findings, the State Judicial Review Board is initiating a formal investigation into judicial misconduct and abuse of power under Section 4, Article 2 of the Judicial Code of Conduct. Effective immediately. Your authority to preside over this or any case is suspended pending full review. No gavel, no bang, just the slow, suffocating sound of a career imploding in real time. Harlan's voice finally cracked through. This is a political ambush. This woman is not even... Estella raised a brow. Not even what? She asked. He blinked. A judge? She said. You're right, I'm not. She stepped closer. I'm the woman who bought the courthouse you disrespected. I'm the lawyer who used to sit in rooms 10 times colder than this one. I'm the widow of a civil rights attorney whose name you once called agitational in a footnote. She leaned in. And I'm the one who watched for years while you handed out sentences like raffle tickets and called it justice. Harlan couldn't speak. Not really. Not with every camera in the room trained on his face like it was ground zero. I'm not here to replace you, Estella said, standing tall again. I'm here to remind everyone that the bench is not a birthright. It's borrowed, and you've officially been evicted. The bailiff moved. 2 federal observers from the Judicial Review Board stepped forward with clipped nods and quiet authority. Harlan stood, shaky, red-faced, already muttering about appeals and lawsuits. Nobody listened. Not anymore. And as he was escorted out the side door, the same one Estella once mopped behind every afternoon, the entire courtroom remained standing. Because the seat he left behind wasn't empty. It was cleansed. The door creaked behind him, like it didn't want to be a part of this either. Judge Ronald Harlan, former Judge Harlan, was being walked out of courtroom 2B. Not cuffed, not shackled, but close enough that you could smell the panic on him. His suit looked too big now. Like power had been holding it up this whole time and decided to let go. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't clap, just watched, silent, unforgiving. The kind of silence that doesn't feel respectful. It feels like gravity. He tried one last time, one last swing at dignity. This is insane, he stammered, spinning on his heel toward Estella, his voice cracking like old wood. You people think this is justice. You think some glorified janitor can... He didn't get to finish. Estella stepped forward, not rushing, not rising to his anger, just closing the space between them like a truth walking toward a lie. And she looked him dead in the eyes. You judged me, she said, voice quiet, but sharp as a needle, without knowing who I was. He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand, a simple gesture. Don't. Now, she continued, the system will judge you, fully knowing what you are. The words didn't explode. They landed, like a final nail, like a trapdoor snapping shut under everything he thought made him untouchable. The 2 observers flanking him each stepped a little closer. His shoulders twitched, his fists clenched, but not like a man ready to fight. More like a man who suddenly realized the ring wasn't his. And the crowd? They weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. Estella Ramirez didn't raise her voice. She didn't need a bench or a robe or a nameplate to take command. What she had now was authority. Real, earned, bone-deep authority. The kind that isn't given. The kind that rises after the fire clears. As Harlan was walked out through the side door, his voice grew smaller, fading into hallway echoes. Something about appeals, something about political vengeance. Nobody cared. Not now. The door closed behind him with a muffled click. That was it. The courtroom held still for a beat longer. Just enough time for it all to sink in. Then Estella turned to face the room again. Not smiling. Not gloating. Just steady. And for the first time in that courthouse's long, corrupted history, something in the marble felt new. Like it had stopped echoing lies and started listening to truth. The courtroom was still smoldering with the ghost of what had just gone down when Estella Ramirez called for a meeting in the old records room, now converted into what people were already calling the war room. It wasn't official. There were no podiums, no seals, no live streams. Just a long wooden table scratched by time, surrounded by chairs that squeaked and groaned like they were protesting change. But everyone showed up. Journalists, court clerks, bailiffs, a few public defenders who looked like they'd just been told their lives might finally get less impossible. Even the maintenance guy who fixed the vending machine in the hallway was there, arms crossed, nodding like, "Damn right, I'm listening." Estella stood at the head of the table. No robe, no badge. Just her. Post-reveal. Post-Harlan. Post-bullshit. "Thank you for coming," she started, voice even. "I know this isn't how things are usually done in this building." A few people chuckled, nervous, unsure. She smiled faintly. "That's the point." She laid a folder on the table. Another one. The room tensed. Because now, when she pulled out a folder, it meant something was about to shift. "This courthouse," she said, tapping the top of the file, "has been operating under a hierarchy built on convenience, tradition, and power, not law, not equity, not justice." Murmurs, pens clicked, phones recorded. "That ends today." She looked around the room, locking eyes with faces that had either feared her, ignored her, or underestimated her just a week ago. "We're initiating a full audit. Every ruling from the last 15 years will be reviewed. Every complaint that was dismissed. Every case assigned to now suspended judges. If it passed through these halls, it's getting re-examined." The journalist leaned forward like she'd just tossed a match into a pile of dry secrets. "But it doesn't stop there," she continued. "We're also opening the books on hiring practices, promotions, court-appointed contracts, who got the jobs, who didn't, why." A clerk in the back exhaled hard, muttering, "Finally." Estella nodded toward him. "Yeah, finally." She paused, then flipped open the file, revealing a draft titled, "The Charleston Court Reform Initiative." "Here's what's coming. A public dashboard for case progress. A rotating panel of community reviewers for ethical oversight. Anonymous staff feedback options with external monitors. And new standards for promotions based, not on tenure, but transparency, accountability, and proven fairness." It was bold. Radical, even. But more than that, it was real. Not lip service, not some half-assed policy slapped onto a press release. This was a blueprint to burn out the rot. One journalist raised a hand. "Do you expect pushback from the state, from the mayor's office?" Estella smiled like a woman who had already pre-written 3 responses to every threat imaginable. "Oh," she said, "I count on it." More chuckles now, louder, respectful. "But I didn't buy this courthouse just to repaint the walls," she added. "I bought it so we could rebuild what happens inside them." Another voice spoke up, quiet but clear. "Why now?" Estella turned, eyes softer than before. "Because I was tired of watching good people lose in silence," she said. "Because I've cleaned up after enough messes I didn't make. Because I've seen this city pretend fairness is expensive, when what's really costly is cowardice." Dead quiet again. Then slowly, a few hands clapped, then more, until the whole damn room was applauding. Not like it was the end of a show, but like something had finally started. Estella didn't bow, didn't bask. She just nodded, closed the file, and said, "We've got a lot of work to do." The meeting had ended, but the questions hadn't. People lingered. No one wanted to leave first. It felt like stepping away from a moment that only comes once in a generation. Estella stood near the windows of the converted records room, sunlight casting long, golden beams through the cracked blinds. She was reviewing a call log on her phone, messages from the state, inquiries from federal oversight, one missed call from a number labeled simply Governor's Office. Behind her, a young clerk hovered awkwardly by the coffee machine. Mid-20s, oversized badge, nervous shoes. She'd been the one taking minutes during the meeting, typing so fast she nearly broke the keyboard. "Ms. Ramirez?" she asked, voice small but trying to be brave. Estella turned, patient. The girl hesitated, then just said it. Why didn't you say something sooner, like years ago when you first bought the building?" Estella looked at her for a long second. Not offended, not defensive, just measuring the weight of the question. Then she smiled, soft. Not the kind of smile that says good question. The kind that says you have no idea how heavy that answer really is. She walked closer, stopping just in front of the clerk, then spoke gently. "Sometimes," she said, "you have to stand at the bottom of the system to understand exactly how it's built." The clerk blinked. Estella continued. "You can't break something from the top. That's where they're strongest. That's where they're ready. But the bottom, the base, that's where it's weak. That's where the cracks live. And if you listen close enough, if you're patient, those cracks start telling you where to push." She stepped past the clerk and poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just black and bitter. like how the old days used to taste. I spent over a decade walking these halls, not as a partner, not as a lawyer, as a cleaner, a no-name, a ghost. I saw everything they didn't hide, because they didn't think they had to. She turned back around, cup in hand. I watched how decisions were made. Who got called in, who got shut out. I learned the rhythm of corruption like a song. It never changed, it just got more confident. The clerk nodded slowly. So you waited? I prepared, Estella corrected with a glint in her eye. They built this system thinking power only trickles down. I built a plan knowing that sometimes power rises up, quietly, relentlessly. She took a sip, grimaced slightly, then smiled again. Besides, she added, voice lighter, if I'd spoken out back then, they would have painted me as an angry woman with conspiracy theories and a grudge, but now, she motioned to the room, the files, the headlines buzzing on journalists' phones. Now I'm a woman with receipts. The clerk swallowed hard, then said what she'd been thinking the whole time. They're gonna come for you. Estella didn't flinch. They already are. Then, she turned toward the door, calm as ever, the weight of a legacy in her footsteps. Because when your name finally echoes in the halls where you were once invisible, you don't whisper. You walk loud. The camera holds steady, then slowly, quietly, begins to pull back. Wide shot. Polished marble floors stretch out like a chessboard. Sunlight spills through high-arched windows. The courthouse hums. Not with noise, but with purpose. No chaos, no shouting. Just movement. Clean, deliberate, redefined. And in the center of it all, Estella Ramirez. No mop, no name tag, no apologies. She walks the corridor like it's hers. Which it is. But not in the way Harlan once did, puffed up and swinging power like a blunt weapon. No, Estella's walk is quieter, heavier, louder in silence. A young court officer steps aside as she passes. A bailiff nods. A junior judge straightens their spine instinctively. Clerks make eye contact now. Even the elevators seem to open a little faster when she nears, because she's not a shadow anymore. She's the gravity in the room. The doors she once cleaned behind now open for her, not out of fear, but out of respect. And she doesn't need to raise her voice. Her presence is the voice. The camera pans further back now, pulling away from her figure but never losing her as the focus. She keeps walking steady, her heels tapping out a rhythm the building has never heard before. Order, but not the old kind. Not the kind built on fear, favoritism, or backroom deals. This is new order, built from the ground up, seen from the bottom. Made by someone who watched, listened, learned, and then waited for the exact right moment to strike. She doesn't walk to prove anything anymore. She walks because she already has. And just before the frame fades to black, just as the light from the stained glass justice scales flickers over her shoulders, we hear the final voiceover. You can't judge what you don't understand, but justice? She understands everything. Cut to black, no credits, just silence. The kind that leaves you thinking. The kind that means something's changed. Because the courthouse doesn't belong to the old boys anymore. It belongs to her.